Thank you, Doug. Good evening, everybody. I welcome you all to this first ever virtual meeting of the Cardinia Shire Council being webcast live over the internet and declare the meeting open. Prayer. We will commence the meeting with the following prayer. Almighty God, we humbly request that you bestow your blessings upon this council. Direct and prosper our deliberations to the advancement of your glory and to the betterment of the peoples of Cardinia Shire. Amen.
Amen.
The Cardinia Shire Council respectfully acknowledges that we are on the traditional land of the Bunurong and the Wurundjeri people and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. We have received tonight an apology from Councillor Carol Ryan, who has had an unfortunate accident, so I hope that she is safe tonight. If she is watching, our thoughts are with you, Carol. Good luck. And we have no other apologies unless anyone else has one to bring to the table. There being none, minutes of the previous meeting. Can I have a motion, please, to adopt the minutes of the I'll start that again. Can I have a motion, please, to adopt the minutes of the meetings as listed? Moved by Councillor Colin Ross and seconded by Councillor Graham Moore. All those in favour? I declare that unanimously carried. Thank you, councillors. Declarations of interest. Do I have any declarations of interest? There being none, we shall continue to ordinary business. The council conducts its meetings according to a consent agenda. Councillors have advised of the matters for consideration this evening that they wish to discuss or debate. The remaining items will be adopted without discussion. Before moving to these items, I advise that the applicant for item 3, a 2-lot subdivision within 7 Mile Road, Narnagoon, has withdrawn their application. Therefore, this matter will not be dealt with tonight. The items for discussion at tonight's meeting are as follows. Item 1, Amendment C240, Kui-Rup Township Strategy Implementation. Consider submissions and refer to Planning Panel. To be moved by Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that Council receive and consider all submissions made to Planning Scheme Amendment C240 in accordance with Section 23 of the Planning and Environment Act 1987. Refer all submissions for consideration to an independent planning panel to be appointed by the Minister for Planning. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. And I have indication that Councillor Moore would like to second that. Is that correct, Councillor Moore? Just unmute and just say you're going to second it, please. Yeah.
Correct, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. I'll go back to Councillor Ray Brown to speak to this item.
Thank you, Mayor. At a meeting on the 18th of March 2019, Council resolved to seek the authorisation of the Minister for Planning to prepare and submit and exhibit Planning Scheme Amendment 240. We spoke about that in great detail at that meeting, the whys and wherefores and the advantages of such an amendment, but I'll just summarise it quickly. It seeks to implement the township strategy through more targeted statutory planning tools, being 2 development plan overlays, commonly known as DPOs, and 2 design and development overlay schedules, DDO. Also seeks to change the status of the township strategy from an incorporated document to a reference document. Also, the urban design guidelines will become a reference document. This approach aligns with advice received from the Department of, what they call themselves, Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning, that we should really improve our policy control and built form and subdivision outcomes for Kui-Rup Township. It will also improve Council's ability to defend decisions at VCAT. The concerns that DELP had were that with the incorporation of the township strategy in their entirety into the Cardinia planning scheme, incorporating large documents with specific planning requirements amongst its content makes it difficult for those requirements to be found and in effect are located behind the Cardinia planning scheme. The DELP advises that implementation should occur through statutory planning tools that are more easily located and accessed within the planning scheme, such as the DPO and the Design and Development Plan Overload, DDO. Sorry for using those acronyms, but I don't feel like saying the whole word every time. As a result of incorporating the Coorabba Township strategy in the planning scheme through local policy, Council has had little success in defending decisions at VCAT. More success defending decisions once a specific planning requirements contained in the strategic document are applied through these targeted statutory planning meetings as advised by DELP. The Township strategy identifies that DPO should be supplied to guide growth and development in the two future residential areas known as Moody Street Residential Area and the Sims Lane Residential Area. These are the main areas that the C240 is applying to and where the objections emanated from. What it will do, it will ensure that the character guidelines are given due consideration when assessing planning applications for subdivision and building and works. Also provide direction on issues such as protection of important vegetation and habitats, drainage and other infrastructure, traffic movement, vehicle access, pedestrian links, public open space and landscaping, lot sizes, building setbacks, front fence heights and treatment. So it's a whole bottle, it really is. In respect to DD09, that is proposed to apply to the commercial town centre. That will provide direction on maximum and minimum building heights, activated and articulated building facilities and street frontages, pedestrian amenity, landscape and passive surveillance of the public realm, location of car parking. This amendment was formally exhibited from 1 month, from 13th of February to 16th of March. All owner and occupiers and adjoining Coorabba Township boundary, community groups and relevant public authorities were notified of the exhibition of the amendment. A total of 1,802 letters were sent. In addition to the above, there was a notice in the Pakenham Gazette, Government Gazette, drop-in session at the hairdressers in Main Street, Coorabba for information, on the councillor website, also on the DELP website, and amendment documents made available for viewing at the Cardinia Shire Council offices. The matters raised by submission, and there was 3 late submissions and 1 submission was received during the exhibition period. 2 of these from public authorities and 2 from the 1 landowner. The matters raised were protection of industrial land, unjust requirement for public open space, lot size requirements are not reasonable, road layout and public open space is not workable, drainage requirements not being considered, requiring a development plan is unreasonable. Officers were unable to resolve all matters raised and recommend a referral to an independent panel appointed by the Minister of Planning. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I'll now go to Councillor Moore to speak to this item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Brown. As always, Councillor Brown has been very efficient in noting all the items on this particular planning application. But I do want to thank the submitter actually from to this amendment, particularly from the local Coorabba area. It would have been ideal to receive more submitters out of the 1,800 letters sent out for requests for submissions, but unfortunately we only received 1 local landowner, which is unfortunate. But I would have like to have seen a lot more input from our community. So now we all we have to do now is await the planning minister to select a independent panel to address the questions of that submitted, that resident, and of course of the authorities, our local authorities who had submitted submissions. But I haven't got much more to add, Mr. Mayor. I think Councillor Brown, living in the area, of course, understands the whole issue of the Coorabba strategy, which is very close to our heart. So I'll leave it at that, Mr. Mayor. But thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Is there any other councillors that would like to speak to this item? There being none, Councillor Colin Ross would like to speak. Yep, that's right. You're a bit slow on the draw there, Colin, but you can get in and have a word for sure. All yours.
I don't know why I put up the other hand and it goes out of screen. I need to go with that one. I actually had it up. Anyway, look, just speaking to this item, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Speaking to this item, I know Councillor Brown had spoken to me about the importance of this exercise. So I went down and had a look at Sims Lane and I had a look at Moody Street as well. And I must say I see them as logical inclusions in residential areas that can be filled up down there. So anyway, I just found it very interesting. I think they are logical, those ones. So anyway, that was my observation. We'll wait upon the independent panel to give us some feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Any other councillors would like to speak to this item? There being none, I'll go back to Councillor Brown to summarise.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, councillors, for your comments. In conclusion, the proposed DDOs and DPOs have been prepared in response to actions identified within the Kooyarrup Township strategy and advice from DELP, and will implement the objectives and strategies set out in the township strategy. New overlays will ensure that the character guidelines are given due consideration and are easily accessible and viewable by developers and other people interested in subdividing land when assessing, and also our planners when assessing planning application for buildings and work, and ensure consistency in the design and development. As I stated before, the concerns, and I read them out, they could not be resolved by council officers. Council officers recommend that council accepts all of these submissions and refers these submissions to an independent ministerial planning panel for consideration, whereby council can provide their argument and also the objectors can provide their argument in front of an independent panel and get a decision that suits everybody, we hope. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I'll now put this to a vote. Councillors, all those in favour? I declare this item carried. Thank you. Moving along to item 2, amendment to planning permit for Quarry Tynong North Road, Tynong North, to be moved by Councillor Moore. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mr. I move that a notice of decision to grant amendment planning permit be issued for the amendment to conditions of the planning permit T090757, subject to conditions attached to this report, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. I have an indication that Councillor Brown would like to second this motion. Is that correct, Councillor Brown?
I second the motion, Mayor.
Thank you. I'll go back to Councillor Moore to speak to this item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to mention that when you have 9 objections, which we've had 9 objections or 9 submitters to this particular item, I felt it my duty to them to withdraw this item and speak on it. We don't have to do that by law, but I thought in their respect, I think we need to address a few question and answers that come up in this report. Prior to addressing this report. So I've got to tell you that we did send the circulations out to the people around, the residents who live around the quarry for a kilometre radius. So that was done in respects to the planning requirement. This quarry has been operating since 1987 with very minimal complaints so far. From the parish of Bunyip it was back in those days. This application is just an adjustment to the original permit. So I've got to understand it's not a significant, people think that when it's asking for a 24-hour turnaround 7 days a week, it's a small adjustment to the amendment that's already there. Noting the quarry is a part of the state government rock extraction overlay that we have along that area from the Tynong area right up through into Bunyip. Also, the Tynong, also it's always has been what is it? It's been added to the extractive industry project hot list only just the other day in May the 6th. So it's very important to our state government, this particular area. So I'll go to some of the planning, the actual controls and regulations outside the planning scheme. The permit applicant was required to go through a very stringent assessment of work plan, variation approved by the Department of Jobs, Precincts and Regions. We referred the application to a number of other departments, including Environmental Protection Authority, Earth Resources and Regulations, none of which raised any, and I mean none, any concerns. The planning permit process is only a very small aspect of this process, of course. This is all in the application, Mr. Mayor, but I thought I'd highlight a few things out here. There are conditions in the work plan that also need to be complied with, regulating noise, etc., that are not governed by council. The Tynong North Road and Princess Highway intersection is governed by the Vic Roads, who have ensured that with their conditions being met, the proposal is acceptable. We have been in talks with the Vic Roads and even with our own road engineers here, talking about what we can do in that intersection. It is a dangerous intersection, I must admit. And even that area all the way from Snell Road right up through to Gunville World, that is a significant area that needs a lot of work done to it. And I think in the future that will happen after discussions with our local police and the owners of the quarry there. So changes to the scheme over time have been implemented to ensure the greater protection of this industry, given its state significance to the Victorian economy and residential growth when it's located suitably location to this quarry. Our local policy also supports this use where appropriately located, and that's what I was saying before about the overlay. So there's no change to blasting hours. So the quarry is not going to change its whole operation. It's just changing a small part of that. So there's no change to the blasting hours. The amended permit condition regarding blasting remains in place as follows. The blasting on site must only be carried out between the hours of Monday to Friday between 9 AM and 4 PM. And the noise, of course, is a big issue for the residents that live around that area. Right? I can understand that. The machinery, the secondary crusher and the front end loader, which is the major thing we're talking about here, have been used up to 8 o'clock each night for the last year, with no complaints to us as council being received, to my knowledge anyway, regarding noise coming from either machine. That's till 8 o'clock at night. Noise from the site beyond 10 PM, which is what they're asking for, will only come from the truck and one front end loader. Now these front end loaders that they have today are high energy, very efficient, quiet machines. They're not a noisy type machine of days gone past. So based on the results of the acoustic assessments and noise modelling, the applicant asserts that the noise emissions from the proposed extended hours, operating hours of the quarry are compliant with the relevant guidelines, which are all noted in the report, as you say. So the truck movements is probably one of the other major ones, which is beyond 10 PM, the applicant is seeking permission to use 2 trucks per half hour, which is not a lot, Mr. Mayor, but 4 movements, 2 movements in and 2 movements out. That's 2 movements in, 2 movements out. And the use of one of the front end loaders to load the trucks. It's got to be noted that we're talking about material that's very significant to this particular quarry. The material is, their main product is a small rock that they break down with a smaller machine, a small crushed rock that they use in the manufacture asphalt for the roads. And that material must be sent out to these asphalt plants to get the asphalt made, to get out to the sites very early in the morning. So that's why the need to produce this smaller rock, load it, and get it to these plants overnight. And that's why the permit needs to be put in place, the adjustment to the permit. So you can see that it is not a big drama, but I know that when things come up for a quarry, that an additional permit for that quarry, I could understand and I respect wholeheartedly the objectors and submitters who who would say, okay, we need to address a few things that have been maybe bugging them, if you like, as a term, over the years, that they would like to say, well, let's change a few things. But I did something that I haven't done before in this application. I actually visited 2 residents who live closer to the quarry, near the entryway where the trucks come and go. And they have no issue with the quarry. They don't have any issue with the movements, anything to do with any of the trucks or whatever. They class the quarry as a good neighbour. And I think, and they're right on the front entry to where the trucks are going to come and go. So that's why that makes me think that this will be, I know this will be okay. I actually visited the quarry on the same day. When I stood at the front, I spoke to the residents there and said, and actually the road noise from the highway was actually noisier than what was coming out of the quarry at the time. And that's what happens. There's a lot of noise coming off the road. So the people that are over the highway, I mean, it's hard to understand that it's going to make any significant difference of the trucks getting in and out of that intersection. So I did go and see the owners of the quarry and had a visit. I drove around with them with their cars, and we stopped at the mini crusher. I wanted to stop and have a listen to this mini crusher that was going to cause a problem. And look, I was standing alongside it, so it wasn't that bad under that circumstance with that sort of industry. So really, Mr. Mayor, I haven't got any problem with moving this notice of decision on this particular quarry. But I'll let it go there for the moment. I'll must leave some for my fellow councillors if they would like to add something to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. I'll now go to Councillor Brown to speak to this item.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and thank you to Councillor Moore for withdrawing this item, because it does mean a lot of things to people in this particular area. Unfortunately, there's an insatiable demand for crushed rock, and I think it's only going to that's only going to increase. As Councillor Moore rightly said, the main bone of contention here is the vehicle movements, because the use of the small crusher and also the front end loader as part of their, their amended conditions that they currently operate under. What they want to do now, I think, is to sort of formalise it so that they can operate virtually up till 10 p.m. with the small crusher and the front end loader, and have vehicle movements from 10 p.m. right through to 7 a.m. in the morning. The thing that is that's hard to understand with me, of course, is that 2 trucks per half hour. Does that mean 4 trucks an hour? And is that 24? Is that for the duration? Because they need a lot of trucks if they're going to have trucks coming in and out every half an hour. 2 trucks coming in, 2 trucks going out, which equates to about 7.5 minutes for a truck to come in, load or unload, load and then leave. So I don't think that that's really explained well. In respect to the people's complaints regarding noise, I can understand the complaints, and I did note that council officers did go and stand near properties or the closest properties to the quarry, based on the objector's address, and they could hardly hear the quarry at all. And in fact, as Councillor Moore said, the noise from the highway was probably more intrusive. I think a big difference to listening to noise at 7 p.m. at night and 1 a.m. in the morning, a real still, frosty morning, the way that sound carries. Certainly we're not going to be using the crusher, but we're going to have those trucks coming in and out, and a truck can be as noisy or as quiet as the driver wants to be. I would hope that the driver does not use his air brakes for his slowing down, because I think you'd soon hear something from those residents that have no problems with this at the minute, because as you probably know, those air brakes, people going through the gears, it really, really grates. I emphasise with the people, I certainly wouldn't like to be living near a quarry, but I think that all of the protocols, all of the authorities from relevant authorities have been met, all of the conditions from our local planning requirements have been met. I note that one of the people the trucks will be going directly past their place, the only residence has not put an objection in, which I think is quite significant. I also note that the people around the quarry do recognise the quarry as good neighbours. There's not one evidence of any complaints against the quarry in as far as councillors' records show. So I support the application, even though I sympathise with the people that may be affected. As I said before, there's going to be a lot of goodwill here, and I hope that the quarry comes through with the goodwill. Drivers don't use their trucks, their air brakes as slowing mechanisms, and I think everything will be okay. So thank you again, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Do I have any other councillors like to speak? Oh, Councillor Schilling, all yours.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Moore, too, for withdrawing this item, and Councillor Brown for seconding it. As you both mentioned, it's important for the local residents to have, particularly the objectors, to have this heard. Look, I'm not going to be able to support this application tonight. I have given this a lot of thought and done a lot of research into this, and over the course of the last week, I've come to many conclusions. But look, I acknowledge that this quarry has been operational since 1987, and residents that have moved into this area will be very aware that there is a quarry, and I acknowledge have lived alongside this quarry for some time. This proposal I see is really taking this operation to that next level. Once again, I acknowledge that they wouldn't be using their primary crusher and it's a secondary crusher, but until 10 p.m. at night, that is something else. Even if I know the noise reports were reaching at around 50 decibels to the neighbouring properties, but I still think the residents have right to be concerned about this. And this time I'm going to be supporting the objectors in this. Perhaps if we saw another slightly altered time, 8:30 is probably a bit more reasonable, but 10 o'clock at night with those increased truck movements throughout the whole night. Once again, I totally understand that this is a critical part of our state infrastructure. I know that there's a huge demand for this rock, and I know the projects that we are building in our own local community will require these types of resources, but it just doesn't sit comfortably with me to think that this is essentially a 24-hour operation in some respects. And 10 o'clock, look, it is late. I do appreciate Councillor Moore's work on this and all of the due diligence he has done in speaking with the neighbouring properties, but unfortunately I can't support this application tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Schilling. Do I have any other councillors that would like to speak to this item? Councillor Jodie Owen.
Yes, likewise, I respect my Port Ward colleagues, but unfortunately I will not be able to support this tonight either, based on the reports and some issues that we've had with quarries of late. I do wish everybody all the best, but I'm sorry, I just can't support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Any other councillors would like to speak to this item? Councillor Colin Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too had spoken to Councillor Moore in relation to this, and I note that last week it was brought up at our briefing. I went out I drove out there to have a look at it. I must say the distance from the driveway of the establishment out to the highway is not very far. And as people drive out, they'll notice there isn't a whole lot of the objectors living in that section of the area. So I actually drove out to the nearest objector up the road, and it was a long way up the road. I tell you, you wouldn't want to be dragged behind a car up to where they live, because it was a fair way up. So I'd have to say that this company have been around 33 years. They haven't had an amendment to their application ever since then, and only naturally as a business you want to basically expand. And with the insatiable need for materials in the second largest, the second fastest growing city in the world, basically I think it really defeats the purpose if we don't take and use the needed materials closer to Melbourne. Basically, how much further do we go? How much more diesel do we use? How many more places do we drive past? It's got to this point now where we used to have quarries all over Melbourne, and they've got houses on top of them, or they're being turned into tips, and there's plenty of resources there, but we have to move outside the urban growth boundary. And logically, these places are the closer areas. And I must say, after driving there and having a look at it in person and reading the objectors' views, it's understandable. But quite often when people move out to areas, we know what's there. It's a bit like Essendon Airport. You buy under the flight path to Essendon Airport, you realise there is going to be some noise. And it is sad, but that's part of work. It's a bit like living in Pakenham myself. If you don't want to have people driving around your house and people using the streets around you, well, why would you buy there? Anyway, I'll be supporting this. I think a business does have the need to expand. They've been there 33 years. As Councillor Moore said, there's been minimal complaints in that time. So that shows that they're obviously people who look after their business in a way that doesn't want to create problems for people around them. So anyway, I support this.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Are there any other councillors that would like to speak to this item? There being none, I'll go back to Councillor Moore to summarise.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, councillors, for your input. For or against, I respect your opinion, no matter what it may be. There's a couple of points I want to make before I go back to the mayor for the vote. There's two pits involved in this quarry. There's pit 1 and pit 2, and it was all part of the first on the application. The pit 1 had to be used extensively and used to be exhausted, and that has happened now. So now they've moved from pit 1 up to pit 2, which is nearer the actually a highway. So it's right on the highway edge of where the quarry is, which is further away from one of the major objectors or submitters who was near to pit 1. So therefore a lot of the operations, including the blasting, will actually happen in pit 2. It's not relevant to this particular application tonight, because it's only an amendment for the truck movements and the loading. But one significant thing too is that with all the development that's happened at Warrigal, Druin, and Longmorrie, all those places up that way to the east, it causes so many problems with that intersection at Tynong North Road. So this will alleviate a lot of the problems at that road where the major traffic flow is in the early morning. So therefore, if we get some of those trucks on the road off and out of the quarry area, I'm sure it's going to make a lot of difference to that intersection. Because what we're trying to do is get an additional lane there, actually a speed up lane, if you like, which would be out of that intersection, which should be very worthy to have there, which would fix a lot of the problems. The final thing is, this is really formalising our own requirement as a council. Because what happens is, this quarry requires permits throughout the year to do certain things. When the demand is there, there's a lot more demand. They require extra permits to do the extra hours to actually supply. And so therefore they've got to go through the whole planning process for individual little amendments throughout the year. So this is really to formalise it from our own planning department. So it's not really the quarry. It's our own planning department who want to see this thing formalised. So it's not a big change to the plan there, but I think it's significant to what it will do, particularly the traffic flow and getting this stuff out to the clients where they need to be. And there was one thing that the objector said to me personally, that a lot of building sites don't open at that time in the morning during the night, but it's really to get this smaller type rock for the asphalt industry, which is very important to get that on the move. Mr. Mayor, I will leave it to you, and I'll wait, and hopefully we get this through. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Councillors, I will now put this to a vote. All those in favour, please raise your hands. All those against, please raise your hand. I declare that the item carried by a vote of 6-2. So thank you, councillors. I declare this item carried.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Moving along to item 4, use and development of a dwelling at Lot 4, Ropers Lane, Coralline, to be moved by Councillor Moore. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that this item be deferred for further consideration at the June council meeting to allow additional time for councillors to consider all the merits of this application. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And I have an indication that Councillor Brown would like to second this motion.
I second the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I'll now go back to Councillor Moore to speak to this item.
This because it'll be at the June meeting. We'll come back up. But this application has been around for many years, and I think it deserves further investigation into what we can do in this space with the planning scheme. So that's all. I just to confer with Councillor Brown, and I want to thank him for the second. And I'm sure we will get together with the applicant and with their planners and see what we can do in the future. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Councillor Brown, would you like to speak to this item?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I totally endorse Councillor Moore's comments. I would like to know more about the reasons why this application has been refused. I'd like to know more about the special use zone. Also, some of the wordage in the document is open to contradiction. So I totally support the deferment of this application. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Do I have any other councillors who would like to speak to this item? There being none, I will go back to Councillor Moore to summarise.
Nothing further at this stage, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Councillors, I'll now put this to a vote. All those in favour? I declare this item carried. Thank you. Moving along to item 9, Officers Sport Club lease, to be moved by Councillor Brett Owen. Councillor Owen.
Thank you, Mayor. I move the following. Council commences the statutory procedures under sections 190 and 223 of the Local Government Act 1989. The Act by giving public notice in the local paper and on Council's website advising of the proposal to lease a part of the reserve at 20 Starling Road Officer to the Officer Sports Club Incorporated. 2, in the event of submissions being received, a committee comprising the Rangers Ward councillors be appointed and the Chief Executive Officer be authorised to set the day, time and means for the hearing of such submissions. And 3, following the hearing of submissions, or if no submissions are received, Council further consider the proposal to lease part of the reserve at 20 Starling Road Officer to the Officer Sports Club Incorporated. I move so.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. I've had an indication that Councillor Wilmot would like to second this item.
That's correct, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. I'll go back to Councillor Owen to speak to this item.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. I'm really pleased that this is before Council. So the Officer Sports Club has been established by members of the Reserve Committee and sporting clubs to extend the sports pavilion to create a social space, but it's more of a community room. They have done an amazing job in gathering other government grants. The federal government, $1 million. The state government through Pick My Project, they got 200,000. They got a lot of community support through that grant scheme, and they did get 200,000 from the state government. And also at the council budget last year, council did increase its allocation from a small amount of 190,000 to a much better amount of 400,000 when we went through last year's council budget. So council is committed to this project. So this lease arrangement is required because the sports club and the Officer Rec Reserve Committee want to tender out this project by themselves. Without this lease arrangement, council would have to go through the tender process. and we know that the budget is tight. So the club, the sports club, wants to run this project and tender it out. So this is a real requirement that needs to occur, the lease. I've spoken to the people at the club, the committee of management, and they're happy with this report. They're pleased with the content and the directions forward in relation to this project. I asked them about the 9 years. They were happy with 9 years. At the end of 9 years, there's an easy process to renew the lease, and I'm sure the council today will ensure that occurs. So I'm really pleased, and I congratulate all involved at behind this project. I know this has been a number of years, but this is one of the final steps to get on with it. And all being well, if there is no public submissions, this will get approved, at least be in place, and then they can tender out in the coming months, and we can see some work there happening very soon. So I look forward to other councillors' comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Owen. I'll go to Councillor Wilmot to speak to this item.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have a lot further to add to what Councillor Owen's already mentioned. He's outlined the process very nicely and a bit of the background as well. It is just a requirement because we need to lease the land so that they can do the tender and so forth and the build themselves. So this is just a process that we have to go through. I can't really imagine anybody having an objection to this. I think it's a pretty good outcome for the community, and they certainly seem to have gotten support from the broader community, not just the user groups of the reserve. There's lots of other community groups that have said they would like to use this space as well. So I think the community is right on board with this. So I'm not sure that we'll get any submissions against, which might save us all a little bit of time with having to have hearings and so forth. But I'm pleased that it's at this point. It's been going on for quite a while, and I'm sure the user groups of the reserve are looking forward to just getting in and getting it started. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. Councillors, would anyone else like to speak to this item? Councillor Colin Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I must say the Officer Sports Club have waited a long time for this. I know that all the time I've been on council, they've been working like ants in an ant mine down at that place. I must say it's coming to a head. So hopefully they'll finish up with a reserve that they deserve. I must say a lease of 9 years for $1 a year. I don't think anyone's going to complain about that. They're putting in $200,000 anyway. Plus, as Councillor Owen pointed out, there's so many people who are contributing to this space. Anyway, I look forward to seeing it go ahead and them eventually get into their space. So congratulations to the group, and I hope it goes through. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Are there any other councillors that would like to speak to this item? Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. I would just like to congratulate Councillor Owen on his advocacy in this regard. I know he's fought long and hard. The 4 years I've been on council, it's never far from his mind, and he stands up and he speaks his mind on this particular project, and he has been instrumental in getting some of this funding, particularly the council funding. So I'd just like to add my congratulations. Brett, well done. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brown, and well said. Councillor Owen has been a very big advocate for the Officer Rec Reserve and for getting this funding and for seeing this project delivered. So, yeah, well spoken. Are there any other councillors that would like to speak to this item? There being none, I'll go back to Councillor Brett Owen to summarise.
Thank you, councillors. Thank you for your kind comments. But yeah, this is a really good project. It is an example of hopefully what we can do in the future for other groups. I know it's done a very similar way to what happened in Beaconsfield and also what happened at Chandler Reserve. We do see a better outcome, I believe, both financially and just a project-wise, if you have that sort of contribution from the wider community. It's not just council providing the facility. It's a joint effort. So I acknowledge that the clubs are also contributing over $200,000 towards this project, and I do look forward to coming to bear It will be a fantastic community space, not just for the sports clubs. I know that the officer, CWA, the multicultural groups that we have in officer will definitely use this space. And that's why it got that Pick My project, got many votes through that Pick My project, and they got that grant. So thank you, and I look forward to this happening in the future. Thanks, councillors. I move so.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. I'll now put this to a vote. All councillors in favour? I declare this item carried. Fantastic. Thank you very much. We're going to move along to item 10, which is petition of prohibition of nuclear weapons, to be moved by Councillor Schilling.
Thank you, Mayor. Earlier this month, I met with 2 residents from Emerald, along with yourself, Mr. Mayor, at the council chambers around their campaign that they're working on with the ICANN Cities Appeal, and they were seeking that council join this movement and support the United Nations Treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. I would like to note that 180 local residents signed this petition, and I'd like to thank Marsha and Bob, who are very passionate about this cause. I was just hoping that tonight council could recognise this petition and recommendations in the report.
Thank you, Councillor Schilling. Do I have a seconder for this item? Councillor Wilmot has indicated she would like to second it.
That's correct, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. Councillor Schilling, I'll go back to you to summarise, to speak to this item.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Wilmot, for seconding this. I know that you also know Marsha quite well, and we have met up before at other events. So this ICANN appeal is a part of a United Nations appeal to abolish nuclear weapons across the world. And a part of this project involves signing up councils to say that they to advocate for the abolishment of nuclear weapons across the world. Now, look, personally, I support this treaty, and I'm sure that there's other councils around the room that do feel the same way. But in terms of council's action, we will be referring this petition to state and federal MPs to seek their support. We did have a discussion about this as a council group, and at this point in time, there wasn't support to take further action, particularly at this point of time with the other some of the big challenges that council are facing at the moment. But once again, I would just like to highlight the hard work of Bob and Marsha in their campaign, and also thank the 180 all local residents who had signed this petition. And I really do wish them well, and I hope that they can gain traction on this campaign. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Schilling. I'll go to Councillor Wilmot to speak to this item.
Thank you, Mayor. And as Councillor Schilling said, he supports this petition, and I support the cause as well. I think it's a very noble cause, and one that all humanity should be supporting. But as a council, we haven't had that decision made. We don't have a policy standing on this. So the right thing to do is to acknowledge the hard work that they've put into gaining all of these signatures, acknowledge each and every one of those signature bearers, and thank them for being passionate about this cause, and to then refer it on to our federal members. I think that's the appropriate course of action to take at this point. As Councillor Schilling said, we have met these lead people, Bob and Marsha, particularly Marsha, on a number of occasions, supporting other things that are very near and dear and passionate to my heart as well. So they are good people, and they are driving this forward, and I wish them best of luck in everything that they do going forward from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. Councillors, do I have anyone else who would like to speak to this item? There being none, I'll go back to Councillor Schilling to summarise.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Wilmot, too, for speaking on this petition. One thing that the research that was done by the officers is that council have no investments and have no dealings with any companies that have any investments in nuclear weapons, which is a positive thing from our point of view as an organisation, I believe. And just once again, would like to thank Bob and Marsha for bringing this petition to Council, and also for taking the time to meet with Councillor Springfield, the Mayor, and myself at the Council chambers. And I really do hope that they continue on with this campaign and supporting this very worthy cause. But just to conclude, Council's is acknowledging the petition, but is sending it to state and federal MPs for action, and there would be no further action that Council will be taking at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Schilling. Councillors, I'll now put this to a vote. All those in favour, please raise your hands. I declare this item carried. Thank you. Moving along to item 17, Major Projects Report, to be moved by Councillor Brett Owen. Councillor Owen.
Thank you, Mayor. I move the following, that the report be noted.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. And Councillor Wilmot has indicated she'd like to second this.
That's correct, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. I'll go back to Councillor Owen to speak to this item.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. I think most councillors like this report. It provides a really good summary, snapshot of our current projects. I just want to briefly talk on some of them, if that's all right. Beaconsfield Recreation Reserve, that's a Perth Allison Pavilion. That's a universal upgrade. It's a much needed upgrade. I toured the facility again in the last month or so before COVID-19, just in relation to the design, and it is much needed. It was built in the early 1980s, where you've got lots of showers, and it's not appropriate, for both males and female participants. So that's a really good project. That's obviously jointly funded between council and the state government. So that is progressing. Through my work, I attended Gembrook and looked at the great work that was happening in Gembrook in relation to the Rec Reserve, the pavilion upgrade, and also the netball courts. That's really good. They are coming along really well. Just today, I received, all Rangers Ward councillors received an email from the Worrell Reserve Committee of Management concerned about the comments in this report. It's not quite correct. So I just wanted to clarify that the council has not yet consulted with the Committee of Management. I know that's very important to the Committee of Management. So obviously with the current COVID-19, I think there were some issues with communicating, but we'll reach out to the Committee of Management and obviously get their thoughts about the design, and we won't be proceeding with any works until we've got their comments and support with the design. So I just wanted to clarify that. They were in contact with us today. In relation to the intersections, really exciting that the Princess Highway intersections are progressing well. And the first two to be rolled out, or start commencement, will be the O'Neill Road, Old Princess Highway, and also the Glissman and Beaconsfield Avenue Old Princess Highway intersection. As the report says, we're hoping that the tenders have gone out, and I'm hoping that we can accept the tender in June. That was what officers advised tonight. So all being well, in the coming months following that decision, works will start, and of course Vic Roads will have a say on when those works start. But it's hopeful that towards the end of the year we're going to see some real construction works on those two intersections. And as the report did say, there's obviously a lot of design work happening with the other intersections as well, and we'll see them roll through as well. But it's important that is progressing. And finally, the Connect Cardinia Stage 2, obviously there are a number of roads on that program at different stages, but we're moving on with that. It's really important. So that provides an update. So thank you, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. I'll now go to Councillor Wilmot to speak.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just add a couple of comments about a few projects that are in the hills. Firstly, I also had an opportunity to stop in and have a quick look at the works that's happening in Gembrook. I was out there to lay a wreath for Anzac Day, so I popped in and had a quick look at the progression of the demolition work, and it was well underway. So that's a few weeks ago now, but it was well and truly underway. And the netball courts as well were looking really good. So I haven't been back out that way since, with all the restrictions on where we can and can't travel. I've been a good girl and staying at home. So I'm looking forward to getting out there and having a good look, though, very soon. The other one that I see a lot, because every time I go to the supermarket I see it, is the BMX park at Cockatoo and the works on the skate park area there as well. We managed to get the BMX track finished, complete. The youth of the area had about 3 days to use that facility, and then all the restrictions came in and it all got locked down again. So I guess they're probably absolutely bursting at the seams to get back out there and using it, because it does look really good. The skate park area, the last time I saw it, was progressing along nicely, and again, I think the local youth will be really, really pleased with what's happening down there. There's some pretty good looking jumps and bits and pieces there, so I'm sure it'll be very widely used. And lastly, I just wanted to make mention of the multicultural hub feasibility study. And I'd like to encourage councillors, if you're talking to any community members, particularly those that come from our multicultural communities, please encourage them to go online and do our survey at the moment, so that we can get their feedback on what they want in their facility. We're building it for them. This has come about through some funding that Mr Jason Wood, MP for Latrobe, secured for us at the last election. So we need to make sure that we get it right and we use this funding and this opportunity to the best for our communities. So I believe that some of the communities are a little reluctant to get online and partake, but I know that the consultants are coming to our cold advisory meeting on Wednesday night to talk to our groups there. So hopefully they'll get some good feedback there as well, and I'm looking forward to hearing the feedback about what they think they'd like in their facility. But if you know anybody from any of our culturally diverse communities, I'd really appreciate you encouraging them to get online and fill out that survey. It's not difficult, it's just asking a few questions and asking for their feedback. And I'll leave it there. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. Do I have any other councillors who would like to speak to this item? Okay, there being none, I'll go back to Councillor Owen to summarise.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. Thank you, councillors. Yeah, I agree with you, Councillor Wilmot, about the restrictions of what we can and can't do. But I'm in a privileged position that through my work, I've been checking out these rec reserves for obviously those restrictions. So it's been really good. And the playgrounds, and I can't wait for the playgrounds to be open at the appropriate time, because as the report says, we've had a number of upgrades, and I've sort of focused my attention on the Tantalon Boulevard one in Panorama Estate, Beaconsfield, and the feedback we're getting as councillors is fantastic. I love that renewal program, and the same what you said about the BMX. I can't wait for these facilities to be open for our community at the appropriate time, and we know why we can't use them at the moment. So thank you to the officers and all our engineers for these projects. I know they're doing a lot of great work in these current times, and work is still continuing, but in a different form. So I'm really, really thankful for this report. So I move so. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. I will now put this to a vote. All councillors in favour, please raise your hand. I declare this item carried. Thank you, councillors. That concludes discussion of the items withdrawn. Can I please have a motion to adopt the recommendations for the balance of the items listed? Moved by Councillor Jodie Owen and seconded by Councillor Graham Moore. Councillors, all those in favour? I declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. Reports or minutes of committees. I note that reports from various committees have been received in addition to the minutes of recent council briefing sessions, and these are available if any councillors wish to view them. Councillor reports. Councillors, do you have any matters you wish to report on? Fantastic. All right, councillors. If there's no one has any items they want to bring on, we'll move along. Community question time. We have received one question from Jamie Longyear regarding the APL gas pipeline. And I'll ask our CEO to read and answer the question, please. Ms. Jeffs, would you mind doing that for us?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Mr. Longmuir, for your question. Your question is, what is the council's view on the APA gas pipeline proposed to be built on between Crib Point and Pakenham? AGL's proposal to build a gas terminal in Western Port Bay. Thank you for your question. Hope you're listening in. The council's position regarding the pipelines is that if it proceeds, the pipeline should follow road reserves and existing easements to minimise the effect on farming land. And I'll just give a bit of information about the environmental effects statement process. So on October the 8th, 2018, the Minister for Planning announced that an environmental effects statement, EES, was required for this project. Those documents are currently being finalised, and Council expects the exhibition of the EES to occur in the coming months. Upon exhibition of the EES documents, Council officers will review all of the documents and a report will be presented to Council for consideration. Council will then be able to make a subsequent formal decision on its position in relation to the gas pipeline. I should also note that as part of this process, Council officers participate in a technical reference group for the EES, and as previously mentioned, have brought to the table the fact that Council would like pipelines to follow road reserves rather than being constructed through operational farmland. Thank you for your question, Mr. Longmuir, and thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carol. A written response will be provided to Mr. Longmire also. So thank you, Mr. Longmire. Urgent business. Councillors, a matter has arisen since preparation of the agenda relating to the operation of Mountain Harvest Foods at 400 Mountain Road in Gembrook, and I ask for a motion, please, to admit this item as urgent business. This motion to be moved by Councillor Wilmot. Councillor Wilmot?
Thank you, Mayor. I move that the matter concerning the planning permit for the property at 400 Mountain Road, Gembrook, be considered as urgent business.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. And Councillor Brett Owen has indicated he will second this item. Is that correct, Brett?
Yes, that's correct, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Councillors, I will ask, all those in favour of allowing this urgent motion item? I declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. Councillors, I move that a report be prepared for the council meeting to be held on the 15th of June relating to the planning permit issued for the conduct of a rural industry at 400 Mountain Road in Gembrook. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Wilmot. Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. Look, I'll speak briefly to this item. It just came up last minute, last week, and it's something that councillors were unaware of and was pointed out to us by some concerned residents that live nearby to the site that's in question for this amended planning application. What has happened is this application and the amendment has been approved under delegation of council officers, and without having to come to a council meeting and without councillors being aware of the ins and outs of what's inside that, the nature of what this amended motion was. It's caught us by a little bit of surprise because there is a long history in regards to this site and the neighbours in question that are bringing their concerns forward. And so I think because of this, it's certainly justified to have, to be brought in front of, the community, to be spoken of and understood fully. So what this report requests is that it requests a report be delivered to council for their next meeting so we can fully understand the nature of everything that's involved in this and the nature of how we got to this position of this being an issue as it is. I won't say anything more to it now. I look forward to seeing the report once it's developed, and then we'll have a better understanding of what we are talking about here. But at this point in time, we're just requesting that this report be conducted and delivered to us so we can better understand everything that's involved in this piece of work. Thank you, councillors. I'll go to Councillor Wilmot to speak this item.
Thank you, Mayor. I won't add too much more, but I do thank you for the work that you've put in over the weekend. I know that the residents that are concerned have been in contact with you pretty constantly over the weekend, and I thank you for taking the lead on this, and I'm happy to support you. I look forward to this report. Hopefully it will give us a much clearer picture of what's gone on in the past, what's happened in the recent past, and hopefully then we will be able to find some answers to a lot of questions that are being asked both by residents and by ourselves. And once we've all got a clearer picture, I think we might be able to then start to move ahead, fingers crossed. So I'm happy to support the report, and I look forward to seeing that report come to us in a few weeks' time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. Do I have any other councillors that would like to speak to this item? There being none, then I'll just do a quick summary of this. Again, as Councillor Wilmot pointed out, this is just this request for this report is in the nature of full understanding and transparency. And the problem is this application, the original application, dates back to 2012. So that's a couple of councils previous, council sittings previous to this one, and we really need to understand the complete nature of everything involved so we can work with the community and work with the applicants to find the best outcome possible for all parties involved in this. So I ask councillors to please support this motion, and then we can move forward with this. But this is the next step that I believe we have in front of us to enable this to happen. So councillors, I'll now put this to a vote. All councillors in favour? I declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. Before closing the meeting, I advise that the council meeting proposed to be held next Monday, the 25th of May, will now not be held. This meeting was convened purely for the purpose of hearing any persons that wish to speak to the council regarding their submission on either the council plan or budget. And as no individuals have requested to speak, there is no need to hold the meeting. So we won't be having that meeting next week because no one wants to speak to it, so it would be a little bit pointless. But look, there is a number of people that did make submissions to the council budget and the council plan, so I do appreciate them putting their input. At this point, just so the community understands what we're doing here, no one has requested that they speak to us in person at a meeting for this, so we're not going to hold the meeting next week that was planned. Thank you, everybody, for coming along to our very first virtual council meeting. It's been a little interesting process to get to this point of enabling it. I'd like to thank our staff and the work that they've put into enable this. And I think we've done a pretty good job, councillors, to make this fluidly happen. So, so well done to everyone involved. Look, before I close the meeting, I'll just ask if there's anything else councillors want to bring to the table tonight. Here's your chance, last minute chance to do so. And otherwise, I'll declare the meeting closed. Well, look, thank you, councillors, for your attendance. And I now declare the meeting closed. Thank you.